all these false stories. I mean, this kid comes from a family with family members of multiple races. They did a deep dive on all of his social media. I mean, they did a colonoscopic kind of review of his social media, and they found no connections to any form of racism of any kind, no connections to militia of any kind, no connections to anybody like that of any kind, no statements like that at any time. All they had was that he had once gone to a Trump rally. That was their sole basis. He went to a Trump rally.
There you go.
Exactly. And he's a gun supporter, and he's a police military supporter. And that was it. But most of the media ran with these false allegations, these stream of false to this day, they continue to tell false stories. The prosecutors continue to lie about them, using court proceedings to get away with the lie. The kid's the most innocent defendant I've ever represented, ever been involved with. But the case goes far past him. If he gets convicted, self-defense is dead in America.
All right, so election, Trump, okay. Maybe my YouTube channel's here, maybe not. Either way, I'll be just fine thanks to locals. What else is on your mind right now on the legal front?
Well, I think the biggest biggest case that I have coming up is going to be the Kyle Rittenhouse case, because this is the right of self-defense, which to me, the Second Amendment is not so much about guns. It's about the right of self-defense. The most effective means of self-defense is to have access to the method of self-defense, being a gun ownership. But what the Second Amendment's really about is your right to defend yourself against either the state or other citizens in order to secure your property and your liberty. And there's probably no more pure act of self-defense than what Kyle Rittenhouse did. And the fact they're trying to put him in prison for life is one of the greatest risks and threats to self-defense in American legal history. And that trial's coming up this November.
And it was being cheered on by the mainstream media as if he was a white supremacist, of course. There's no evidence that he's a white supremacist. But could you just back up? And I showed the video on the show, but for people that don't really remember the case, this was in Kenosha. Can you just explain to people what happened and actually what he's charged with?
Sure. So, Kyle Rittenhouse is a son of a working class nurse, single mom, to give you an idea of who he is, he went back and forth when he was young to wanting to do some sort of military or police work or be a nurse. He's a guy who sees himself as a protector, as someone who rushes into a traumatic situation and tries to heal the situation. So that's who he is by personality. That's who he is by biography.
And that's, by the way, what he said in videos that day, right before, that's why he was there. He was not there to hunt anyone down or shoot anybody. He was there to help. Meaning if people were being assaulted, yeah.
Completely. And while people saw the gun that he had for self-defense and for the defense of property and others, what he also had on him was a bunch of nursing equipment and nursing materials to help people. So what happened in Kenosha was after there was sort of a misrepresentation in what happened in the Blake case, where they thought the police officer did something different than what was actually the case, as it ultimately turned out. So it was one of those sort of fake BLM narratives, that all of a sudden they started having riots. They started burning down the city. Kenosha is a working class town on the border of Illinois and was in between Milwaukee and Illinois. They were burning down businesses. And what a lot of people don't know is most businesses don't have arson insurance, or particularly riot insurance. Riot's often an exception under their insurance policies. So these were businesses that were small businesses that were wiped out forever. No means of recompense. And this was happening day after day, night after night. The governor was the Democratic governor was letting it happen, frankly, not calling in the National Guard. So a bunch of local people in the community went out that night and said, let's protect people. And what Kyle did was, let's protect people, and I'm going to be able to try to help people who get hurt. And so he goes out there, and that night, the first person that he gets different attacks on him. And then finally he gets this one guy who chases him down, throwing things at him. People are firing guns behind him.
Yeah, there's video of all of this, by the way.
All of it, exactly.
Yeah.
He grabs the gun, tries to pull the gun away from him. He ends up getting shot. By the way, this guy was suicidal. He had been previously convicted of a bunch of horrendous crimes. He had tried to kill himself repeatedly. He'd just been let out of a mental institution. So that was the mindset of this individual who attacked him, and he put things into motion. I think if that guy had got that gun that night, there'd be a lot of other people dead, because he's got a mass shooter kind of psychology. So Kyle probably saved a lot of other people's lives that night just by defending himself in that situation. Then Kyle's trying to run away, trying to run towards police, When he gets chased by more people, he gets thrown to the ground. People attack him with a skateboard. Another person comes at him with a gun. One person he shoots that dies. One person he shoots gets harmed. But in both cases, they're grabbing his gun, trying to pull it away from him, while one person's trying to shoot him, another person's trying to hit him. So after that happens, he's still in shock. He runs towards the police, gives himself up. They tell him to go home. And then he gets charged with multiple counts of intentional homicide and attempted intentional homicide, where they're trying to put him in prison for life, even though everybody, including the New York Times, who broke down the video, said this is one of the cleanest, clearest cases of self-defense they've ever seen.
I actually missed that from the New York Times, because most of the media that I saw was just, this kid's a white supremacist. I mean, that's what it was. He was a white supremacist, in essence, hunting down black people, even though it's all on video.
All these false stories. I mean, this kid comes from a family with family members of multiple races. They did a deep dive on all of his social media. I mean, they did a colonoscopic kind of review of his social media, and they found no connections to any form of racism of any kind, no connections to militia of any kind, no connections to anybody like that of any kind, no statements like that at any time. All they had was that he had once gone to a Trump rally. That was their sole basis. He went to a Trump rally.
There you go.
Exactly. And he's a gun supporter, and he's a police military supporter. And that was it. But most of the media ran with these false allegations, these stream of false to this day, they continue to tell false stories. The prosecutors continue to lie about him, using court proceedings to get away with the lie. The kid's the most innocent defendant I've ever represented, ever been involved with. But the case goes far past him. If he gets convicted, self-defense is dead in America.
So how worried are you in general that the reality and the evidence of cases like this actually don't matter anymore, and what really matters is public opinion or pressure put on by the mayor? Or we saw, that the city of Minneapolis paid out, I think it was $26 million, if I'm not mistaken, to George Floyd's family before the verdict of the trial. That really, the theater has far more to do with what happens than the reality of the case.
What I've been taught, what I teach a lot of young lawyers, is the court of public opinion often matters a lot more than the court of law. That you can lose a case in the court of public opinion before you can ever win it in the court of law. And that was what's critical in Kyle's case. It was critical to get all these false. There's a reason why prosecutors keep lying about him in court over and over again. It's because they know that those lies will be repeated by the media, which will get back to the jury pool and the judges and the politicians, which will have some role in how Kyle's case is done. That's why you have to defend. The U.S. Supreme Court said 40 years ago, a competent lawyer must defend his client in the court of public opinion and to actually be an effective representative of his client. That's why the court of public opinion is critical. And that's why a lot of people who think they may be powerless don't underestimate their own power. Their participation in the court of public opinion ultimately shapes the outcome of these cases.
When you talk to some of the prosecutors, off the record, if you're having a whiskey with one of these guys after, do they realize how evil what they're doing is, or they just believe it's just part of the process?
For some of them, they actually believe in it. They're politically ambitious, politically aspirational. They're people who will just they believe the ends justify the means. It's the whole sort of new left. The new left is not like your old classical liberal who believed in the process for its own sake. This new left believes the process is ridiculous. The process is solely there to achieve a certain objective. And that's why they have hypocrisy means nothing to them. Unlike Dante's, bottom level of hell, they would, in their level of hell, hypocrisy takes you to heaven. So it's a whole different mindset. And a lot of them actually celebrate their misconduct, celebrate their malfeasance. The Rittenhouse prosecutor is one of the most unethical prosecutors I've ever witnessed.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversation about law instead of the nonstop yelling you get everywhere else, check out our law playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're both right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.